She was the first black woman to have a solo show at the Whitney Museum of American Art, and the 8-decade-long road to get there was a fascinating one. Here's the story of the artist who, at 81 years old, would blow up the art world. Hello, art lovers. My name is Christopher West, and I'm hoping to create a space here where we can talk about modern art and design in a hopefully non-pretentious way. And today I want to talk about Alma Thomas. Alma was born in 1891 in Columbus, Georgia. Not the ideal time or place for an ambitious African-American girl. From a young age, she showed an interest in the arts, but in Georgia, she wasn't even allowed to go to a museum. Her mom played violin and did her best to expose young Alma to the arts, but the opportunities were extremely limited. Thomas said, "When I finished grade school in Columbus, there was nowhere that I could continue my education." And then came the Atlanta race riots of 1906. So, at the age of 16, to escape the racial violence in Georgia and to seek the benefits of a public school system, the family moved to the Logan Circle neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Now, D.C. was no paradise, and certainly the city was segregated, but here she was allowed to continue her education and would eventually land at Howard University, where she would study home economics. The artist James Herring convinced her to change her major to art, and she would become the first woman to earn an art degree from Howard. In 1915, Thomas started teaching, and she would eventually land at Shaw Junior High School, where she would teach until 1960. During this time, Thomas never stopped creating, never stopped learning. It is a myth to say that all of a sudden she started painting after she retired. She continued to study at Howard and would teach weekend, evening classes for various organizations throughout the community. And she continued to paint. She strove to create images that were not only skillfully executed, but beautiful. She said, "Through color, I have sought to concentrate on beauty and happiness, rather than on man's inhumanity to man." Here are two still lifes she created while teaching at Shaw Junior High School. Here we see her exploring different styles and techniques before she lands on her signature style. And in these, we can see the influence of Paul Cézanne, both in color and form. So how did she get from here to here? In the 1950s and prior to her retirement, Thomas doubled down on her studio time and started taking classes at American University. Jonathan Walls, the Columbus Museum's curator of American art, said, "That's why, in 1960, she was able to hit the ground running. She didn't come out of the blue. She was paying her dues all along." Her colleagues and peers would continue to encourage her to explore abstraction. She studied the color theories of Bauhaus artist Johannes Itten. She traveled to Europe to study art, which intensified her focus on painting. And in 1961, she attended a show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York that featured the late career works of Henri Matisse. It was here she saw Snail, an abstract composition of cut and pasted squares of colorful paper created by Matisse in the early 1950s. Thomas was off to the races, and in 1963, Alex Greenberger in Art News said, she set out to turn Matisse on his head. She effectively recreated the iconic Matisse painting on her own terms. Matisse used gouache on paper to create his collage. Thomas worked in acrylic and directly on the canvas. The composition has rotated, and the title has changed from one that references an animal to one focusing on abstraction. From here, she continued to work with dazzling and vibrant colors, creating what she called Alma's stripes. And if she didn't tell you, you might not know that she was working from nature. She would observe the seasonal changes of her garden and the trees in her yard, which would inspire paintings like Wind Dancing with Spring Flowers and Wind with Crepe Myrtle Concerto. And some might say this pleasant work was a little out of step with the times, as civil rights protests were often happening right outside her door. But Thomas did not like the label of black artist. She wanted to be defined as an American artist. To Alma, whose life and practice were shaped by segregationist policies, being a black woman at this time was a distinctively American experience. And in 1972, Thomas would have all of this work, all of this struggle, culminate with a banner year. September 8th of that year would become Alma Thomas Day to coincide with a major exhibition at the Corcoran Gallery in DC. And at the age of 81, she would become the first black woman to have a solo show at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Who would have ever dreamed that somebody like me would make it to the Whitney in New York? Alma Thomas passed away in 1978, and like so many women artists, her work fell into relative obscurity after her death. But this isn't the end of the story. In 2009, the Obamas hung the work Skylight at their private residence in the White House, and this piece became the first work by an African-American woman to enter the permanent collection at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And from here, the market for Thomas's work really took flight. Sadly, during COVID, the Greenville County Museum of Art sold Alma's Flower Garden for $2.8 million. This sale is unfortunate and noteworthy because it meant a piece of Alma's work was taken out of view from the public. Perhaps I'll do a video in the future on what it means when a museum decides to sell a piece from their collection. And that price has since been eclipsed by both Sotheby's and Christie's. And now, even her watercolors can go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you enjoyed this, please take a moment and subscribe to my channel. I've been blown away by the response to my first few videos, and I'm really looking forward to making more. If you haven't looked at those yet, I'll attempt to put a link somewhere up here. And you can always find my contact information and a little bit more about me down in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Ciao!